My name is Ashutosh, and we're going to talk about this topic called strategic negotiation. One. So I start with a small gratitude. I'm sincerely thankful to my teacher at IIM Lucknow. His name is Professor Himanshu Rai. He is now the director at IIM Indore, and he has a very versatile personality. And if you go through his Twitter or LinkedIn, you will know what versatility I'm talking about. He has been doing. He's a PhD in negotiation from Ahmedabad himself, and he did a lot of hostage negotiations for people, and he was also on the board of some airports to do ransom negotiations. So like he is the real pro at negotiation. He taught us a lot of practical inputs to it. So I have just collected some of it and I'm trying to share it here, and I try and imbibe all of this in my daily life because I believe negotiation is also something which is everywhere, and we negotiate with possibly every discussion we do, be it with our boss, with our subordinates, or be it with a sales pitch. So, quick about myself. So, my name is Ashutosh, as already mentioned, and I'm an MBA in Finance and Marketing from IIM Lucknow. This is the Working Managers Program which I did from them, and I train and write diverse topics. So, because of my background from technology, moving towards MBA and now as product manager at Reference, so I now train and write on diverse topics, including marketing, negotiations, communication, and MS Excel in general. I'm a father to a 3-year-old boy. He's my son. This picture is slightly old. Both of us are doing what we like to do the most, that is sleeping. So I think that picture sums up what we do and what we enjoy the most. Currently, I am reading this book called Everybody Writes by Nina Handley. This book talks about that nobody is a born writer or nobody is a born creator. We create, we write every single time, every single second we do. So it just talks about how you can break the stigma of that you cannot write something about this. So that's a brief about me. What we are going to do today is we're going to run this into three basic parts. First, I'll talk about the overall negotiation framework. Then we will delve into more specifics of job offer negotiation. And then I have two caselets from my personal experience, which I'll be discussing. Some of you might be more matured, rather all of you might be more matured, and this can be a good interactive session where we learn from each other, where we learn from each other in terms of what theory we know, what experiences we have had, and let's make this as a more of a collective learning process and not of a one-to-many learning process. So firstly, in your opinion, if you can type in chat or if you can just speak it out also, what's the most important thing required for negotiation to occur? What's the root of negotiation? If someone can tell, probably unmute or type on chat or whatever it is, or whatever you feel convenient about. What do you think is the root of all negotiations? Why are negotiations even taking place in the first place? Why are we win-win situation leverage? True. So win-win situation is a result of what we're expecting out of a negotiation. That's not the root why a negotiation happens. Leverage might again be something which is a byproduct of a negotiation, again not the root why negotiation happens. So just to try and speed this up, it's the most important for a transaction, yes, but why does every transaction require a negotiation? Unfair distribution of capital, that's close. Mutual interest, more dedicated towards work, that's some interesting responses. So I think the closest here which is coming is unfair distribution of capital. If you delve it down further, the most important thing required for negotiation to occur is a conflict. We need a conflict between two people for negotiation to happen. If you and me agree that we need a win situation, then we won't need such a hard negotiation. But we need a conflict that you and me are not agreeing on certain things. You and me have different mutual interests. So there is a conflict underlying everything, and that is because the negotiation process even starts. So to have a negotiation, The most important route is a conflict, a disagreement, or just a गुस्सा भी हो सकता है कि ठीक है नहीं होता है. Then we have to start negotiation also. So what mistakes people do while they negotiate? The most fundamental mistake which people do is they go without a strategy. They go without a plan and get themselves stuck in petty topics. A lot of times you figure यार मैं क्यों जाऊंगा उसके घर पे या वो क्यों आएगा मेरे घर पे, waste, or should I start first or should I wait for the other party to start? These are petty topics where we get stuck, but we don't discuss on the larger framework. Should I negotiate on their turf or should I negotiate on my turf? Some people like it, yeah, let that guy come to my place and then we will negotiate. He needs this job more than anything else. If I go to his place, it look like I am more desperate around this. We are stuck in these smaller questions. Of course, these are also important questions, but not as large as something which we're going to talk about. Should I start with something I really need, or should I have some bargaining chips? These are again questions which we get stuck from since the beginning itself. However, none of them could be answered. These are all important questions, and none of them could be answered if there is no strategy in place. If we don't go with a legitimate homework, if we don't go with a legitimate background study, all these important questions might get unimportant answers. So before we actually start negotiating, let's prepare in a more frameworkish approach. So let's study this strategic framework now. So for a negotiation, you need you need to consider into picture these 7 things. These 7 things include a BATNA. I'll talk about what BATNA is. Parties. Who are the parties? Again, I will talk about each of them in detail. Interests. Value we will also discuss in terms of ZOPA, which is called the zone of possible agreement. Barriers, power in negotiation, and ethics. So these are the 7 areas around which your negotiation strategy should be designed. All of you might be doing all of this in parts or in totality, but this is just giving names, or this is just giving a framework to what you have been doing, so that you can do what I have been doing in terms of negotiation in a better way. So what is BATNA? So BATNA is the most important word in negotiations, and it will keep coming a lot of times in this session. BATNA is expanded as best alternative to negotiated agreement. It is based on the simple fact that if at some point in a negotiation, one ultimately has to choose between accepting a deal or pursuing more attractive alternatives. That means if we don't go with this deal, what is the second best thing which I have with me? If I don't take this job offer, what's next for me? If I don't buy this sabji from this sabji wala, what's the next option for me? If I'm not able to convince my boss to give me X promotion, what's the next alternative with me? So the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which you think is the best agreement, what's the alternative to it is called the BATNA. Although this seems very obvious, but a lot of times we get stuck कि इसके अलावा कोई alternative ही नहीं है. We don't have any other alternative. But that's why the sheer realization of what is your BATNA is very tough. For example, if I'm not able to crack a home purchase deal, I have a decent alternative of where I'm living today on rent. So we all have alternatives, but we just get stuck in the desperation of getting that deal that we don't realize what's our alternative and what value it holds. Main thing to remember is BATNA is a course of action that you will take. It's not the bottom line. It's not a value, it's an action. So you need to put a value on your alternative so that you can come with a walkaway point. So walkaway point, for example, if I'm negotiating a job offer, I am negotiating for a 50% raise. My alternative is another offer which is giving me 20% raise. So at 20% is my walkaway point. So walkaway point is a real dollar value at which you will be off the negotiation table. So BATNA is the course of action. Walkaway point is the value you put into that action so that you can understand when to walk away from the negotiating table. At times, you will have a very real BATNA in terms of dollar value. At times, you will have a very notional BATNA. For example, your current job is also a BATNA, but that's a notional BATNA. You don't have a real value to put over it. So determining your alternative, that's called BATNA, and your walkaway points are the cornerstone of a negotiation, because if you don't know this, you might end up in a win-lose deal where the lose ends up being at your side. So understanding your alternative, trying to put a value to it, is very important in a negotiation process. Any questions on this, please?
I think we are good for now. We can always take questions. I feel right now just started, so
Okay.
still.
Early days, yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay. The second important part in negotiation is interests. So any negotiating literature you read, I'll recommend some books at the end. We'll talk about positions versus interests. So positions are you have taken while on the negotiating table, and interests are the real goals which you want to achieve through that business discussion. So you might end up saying that I need a $50 per hour billing rate for this assignment. You might have taken that position, but eventually you want that assignment because you have no other assignment and you want your bills to be paid off. So taking a position of getting $50 per hour for that assignment when you don't have any other assignment in place, when you don't have any other alternative, when the other alternative is almost zero, taking a strong position that I will need only $50 per hour might be detrimental to a negotiation and might be detrimental to your end goals which you want to achieve from that business transaction. So most negotiators, or most human beings as all of us, get stuck on positions कि हम ये नहीं करेंगे, but we don't decide that what do we want actually. We get adamant at that we will not do this, but what is our want, what is our ask? We miss out on all this in that adamancy, and thus we create an impasse in that negotiation process. So interests are deep inside us. Interests are deep inside. I will not tell you that what I want, what I really want. I will tell you that I want $50. I will not tell you what I really want. So interests are deep inside and positions are superficial. So you need to do a more tactical probing to come out with somebody's real interest. You have to ask more open-ended questions. You have to ask more questions, more probing to get the questions from the other side with whom you are negotiating. Because somebody will not tell you, ठीक है मेरे को ये चाहिए. People will open up slowly. People will open up when they have a trust established, when they trust you, when they know you. So a more tactical probing, a more collaborative approach is required to get your interests. So your interests will decide your negotiating strategy. What are your goals and what strategy should you deploy? So if you have substantive goals, means more objective goals like money goals or like materialistic goals, then those goals are called substantive goals. If you have more relational goals, more long-termish goals, then those are more subjective goals, to be honest. And that's the strategy which you should probably use. For example, if you have high importance on a substantive goal and high importance on a relational goal, then you should have a more collaborative negotiating strategy where both of you collaborate to increase the overall value, so that both of you end up gaining what you initially expected, or from what you initially expected. If you have high importance for a substantive goal And low importance for a relational goal, for example, you're doing a one-off transaction. For example, you're buying a house from a broker. So that's a one-off transaction which you will be doing. You won't go to that broker every year or every month. So you would like to have a more material related goals out of that. So in that case, you can be more competitive in terms of your negotiating strategy. If you have a goal which is low importance in terms of substantive nature and high importance in terms of relational nature. For example, you are getting assignment from, let's say, Tesla or Google, and you just want that assignment come what may, irrespective of what compensation is coming with it or whatever is coming with it. So we'll put that relational goal as high importance. In that case, you will be more accommodative in your negotiation, that you will agree till the time your larger goal gets satisfied. And if you are not clear that what do you actually want, do you want a more material goal or more subjective goal, then you will actually try and avoid your negotiation altogether. Just like people when they don't want to get married, they just avoid it because they don't know what they actually want from that particular transaction to happen. So your goals will also decide your negotiating strategy. So this is a very basic 2x2 matrix. You can go through it and see what fits best in your approach. The third jargon which we have is called ZOPA, and ZOPA is called a zone of possible agreement. In simple terms, it's the bargaining range from what minimum value to what maximum value can the bargain actually happen. For example, Ashish will not sell a car for less than 1 lakh rupees. However, he prefers to get 2 lakh rupees, and the maximum Charu can go to buy a car is 1.5 lakh rupees. So Ashish will walk away at 1 lakh if he is going to sell his car, and Charu will walk away at 1.5 lakh if she wants to buy a car. So the zone of possible agreement between both of them is 1 to 1.5 lakhs, because that's the range which suits both. Of course, if Ashish wants to maximize his profit, he would go to 2 lakhs, but he would not take anything less than 1 lakh. So the zone of possible agreement between these two people is 1 to 1.5 lakh. If Ashish finds another prospective buyer who has a range till 2.5 lakhs, then the zone will increase from 1 to 2.5 lakhs. So ZOPA is the range between the two walkaway points. Basically, what's the buyer's walkaway point and what's the seller's walkaway point. And in a business deal, nobody is going to tell you when he or she is going to walk away. If that happens, then the negotiation will get clicked at the first meeting itself. So nobody is going to tell you what's my walkaway point or what's his walkaway point or what's her walkaway point for that matter. So it needs a real knowledge of BATNA of both sides. Both sides means you need to know what is your walkaway point, and you need to have an idea about your receiver's walkaway point. So since nobody is going to reveal, you have to be more probing, more investigative, more trust building to get answers to all these questions. So ZOPA plays a major role in collaborative negotiations where both the parties have mutual interests and are working towards enlarging the pie. So for collaborative negotiations, this becomes all the more important because you want to increase the overall value which is on table for both of you. So that's the zone of possible agreement, in terms of also called as ZOPA for you. Any questions on these three inputs?
Ashish, I think we had one question, and I think this one is actually going to be helpful. Can you explain what is an example of BATNA when, let's say, you're asking for a raise in a current company?
If you're asking for a raise in your current company, then it's called the best alternative to negotiate the agreement. Then if you already have an offer, and that offer becomes your BATNA from some other company. If you don't have an offer, then your current situation is unfortunately your BATNA. So because that's the best alternative. That's not the best thing which you look at, but at the moment, that's the best alternative which you have. If you get another job offer from somebody, some other company, then that becomes your, and that of course is higher than what you're currently getting, and that becomes your Batna in that case. So Batna might not be the best what you actually want, but it's the best what you actually have at the moment. Am I clear on this, or should I explain further?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. The fourth fundamental aspect is barriers, and that's something which we all have and which we all face every day while we negotiate with bosses, with clients, with wives, with children. We face these barriers every single day, and you might have knowledge of everything of whatever you have talked about. You might be the best in this world, but barriers is something which stops the whole negotiation to even start and at times to finish. So some of the common barriers which we see are strategic behavior or overplaying of hands. For example, you are negotiating a raise, you don't have a job offer, but you overplay your hands that I am already getting a job with more raise than what you're giving it to me. And somebody might call out your bluff and you might get actually stuck in this place. So overplaying of hands is a barrier, because sooner or later it gets picked up. Psychological barrier or interpersonal barrier. Taking the example from what the question was asked from Rajat, I guess, that if ये मेरा बॉस नहीं होता तो ये मेरे को नेगोशिएट कर लेता, या या इस डील के लिए क्लाइंट की ओर से सीएफओ की जगह सीएमओ आता तो ये डील क्रैक हो जाता. We put a barrier that on person, on psychology, ये खड़ूस है. This purchase manager is a खड़ूस purchase manager. He will not buy it. He places barriers of a person's personality, of person's history, of person's experience, and that also becomes detrimental to your negotiation. Emotional barriers. For example, you get stuck. यार मेरे को I want this house because it has a great pool facing view, it has a great sunrise view, and I come what may, I need this because it has something जो struck हो गया है मेरे साथ और मेरे को emotionally चाहिए ही चाहिए. तो उस चाहिए ही चाहिए में we end up doing a very win-lose deal, again lose on your own side. And the fourth barrier, which is common of people who work in large-scale organizations, who work for government organizations, is institutional barriers. You are getting a good deal, you're getting a good pack, you're getting a good service, let's say a good service contract, but the price is higher. Your company says कि हम इससे ज़्यादा price नहीं देंगे, but that after sales service contract was much valuable than the current increase in price. But you get stuck with institutional barriers and you don't actually end up doing that negotiation. So barriers are again very, as the name suggests, they are detrimental to your negotiation, and one should be very clear in their head that am I putting this in front of this negotiation, and is it being deterrent to my current deal of business. The next topic is power. In his book, Professor Himanshu Rai has mentioned about 30 powers of negotiation, but we cannot discuss everyone, and because that would require another session in itself. I'll discuss the five most used powers in considering the audience which we have for this session. So the first is the power of Batna, that if you have an alternative with you, if you have a legitimate alternative which is actually a very good alternative in your hand, that's the most powerful thing, and that gives you a lot of power in negotiation. If I already have a job offer which is giving me a good raise, I will be able to negotiate better with the current company and with any other company which I'm applying to next. So the power of having a good alternative is always the best source of power in negotiation. The power of knowledge of information. If you know that what the other person wants, if you have information about the other party, then that's the power which you have with you. For example, if you know your boss cannot pass this release without you, if you know that your boss needs you for some time, for a long time, or if you've created that rapport with your boss, you might call it ethical or unethical, but if you need people around you, so if you have knowledge of people that what do they actually want from you, then that's a great source of power to you. The third is power of knowledge of a subject. For example, I was about to get job offer from a company who used to supply fire regulators and fire suppressors to large scale projects. For them, their greatest power of negotiation is the power of knowledge of a subject. Because fire regulators and fire suppressors is a very niche field, and not everybody has the language knowledge about it. So they used to exploit that power of knowledge a lot in getting good deals for themselves. It's also called as information asymmetry, where I have more information about the subject and you have less information. So I will use that information asymmetry to my purpose, and depending on my negotiating strategy, I will use that power of knowledge of a subject. The next two are quite related: power of position and power of giving a reward. For example, if we are negotiating with our bosses and we don't have a very strong partner, then our boss has more power than us because he can reward us or he can do XYZ to us. So he has the power of position of authority. Similarly, if you are a boss to someone, you have that power unless the other person has a very good partner to negotiate with. So all of us might not be having all the powers, or rather some of the powers at all the time, but having some of them is always good for your negotiation. But remember, your negotiating strategy is the cornerstone of your whole negotiation, because if you're trying to do a more collaborative negotiation, you will use power for collaboration. If you're trying to do more competitive negotiation, you will use this power for gaining the highest value of the pie. Some other points of the problem, and because at times, again, like I said, we get stuck in psychological barriers. We negotiate with the person, but we don't negotiate on the problem too much. And some other point is another point is closure to the deadline. So at times you will see that negotiation is easier when you are closer to the deadline. For example, if you try and buy an insurance around in the month of March, the deal is easier to crack because they have sales target they want to meet. If you do it similarly, if you do credit card deals at the end of the quarter, that becomes more easier to crack because the deadline is coming closer. So these are two other important points which you can keep in mind while you negotiate. Any questions? Anyone?
Yeah, I think we have a couple of questions. Just wanted to quickly check in how are we doing on time? Because I think there will be a hard stop at 6, right?
Yeah.
So are we doing well? Good on that front?
Yeah, we are good.
Okay. Cool. So let's maybe just take a couple of quick questions, and I think they're kind of related. So Jigyasu wants to know that, okay, like how do I negotiate if I don't want to necessarily interview at another company? Do I need to have an offer, or are there any other ways of having that, like alternative options? Is that the only way we can, have much more solid ground, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I'm reading that question. Yeah. Okay. So Jigyasu, it depends a lot on case-to-case basis. But having said that, it's not the case that if you don't have an offer, you cannot negotiate. You can negotiate depending on the kind of person you're negotiating on the other side with. If you're negotiating with a manager or your boss who is more understanding, then probably you can try and negotiate on the value which you bring on table. You can try and take it to more dollar values. You can try and map the value which you bring on table to dollar value and then negotiate. So you can always negotiate without a job offer also, but it depends clearly on the person, on the context, and what actually value you bring on table. To my personal extent, to my personal story, I actually try to negotiate not for a job not for a raise, but for a different role of work without having a job offer. But I couldn't crack it through myself. Having said that, nobody's a pro at it because even though my boss understood, but he had also his own institutional barriers because he could not talk to somebody in the other department or other business units to crack this deal. So sometimes we get stuck in institutional barriers and we don't do this. But if you are able to communicate your value and if the listener is ready to hear you in the right spirit, probably you don't need any other job offer from the company also. Uh,
Let's move on. I think, yeah.
For Shashank's question, if you don't have an alternative option, what if you want to use based on knowledge, how one should measure their expectations and develop a negotiating strategy? Okay. Shashank, again, this comes from probing questions.
I think these are very specific questions. Maybe like just in the interest of time, I think I'll make a note of these questions, but we can just take them like, let's just finish the deck that we have. And always we have Slack for sure, right? We can always take the specific questions on Slack. So.
Shashank, for this point, when negotiations is completed partially, say if the employer says they will match expectations a quarter period means ending the probation period. Okay, should that be hard coded on the paper? If you can get it hard coded on paper, nothing like that. So ideally, yes, it should be hard coded on paper, and I think if the employer is doing in the right spirit, they would have no apprehensions doing it on paper. To my understanding. For this question, yeah. Okay, let's quickly move to job offer negotiation. Why do people don't negotiate job offers? First, people don't negotiate job offers. I myself did negotiate the current job offer too much. Not because of all this, but because I'll tell you why later. Because fear of losing the job offer is there, because already the job market is very scarce and very competitive, that we end up having a fear of losing the job offer. And incorrect valuation of own skills. We don't value what our skills actually, we are not able to put a good value to what value our skills hold. So that's the second reason we don't negotiate job offers. And third is that the God in us rises, that we might sound greedy and we might not be able to negotiate this and largely लगेंगे, and we might not be able to sound greedy about this. So Shardul has a question, I guess.
No, I think he just wanted a clarification whether we'll share the deck or not.
Yeah, I did I googled some survey and I also talked to a few HRs in person while I was preparing this deck. So this is some input from that. So 53% employers say they're willing to negotiate salary, and more than 52% say they initially offer lower salaries to leave a room for negotiation. So it's a legitimate effort that from their side to offer lower salaries and to leave a room for negotiation. And if the candidate is very good, then even the policies can be bent over. So policies are generally for the 90% people, but for the 2% super good people, policies can be bent over. I will give you an example. In my previous organization, there was a candidate which was to be hired for a role in Bangalore. He was interviewed from the team in Taiwan, from the headquarter team in Taiwan, multiple rounds. He was sent to Taiwan for an interview directly with the business head and the business group head. The candidate was really valuable, or he was so good, or whatever was the story. There were special approvals taken from the CTO for his salary appraisals, salary asks, and he was released an offer even after bending all the policies which were meant for all of us standard people there. Even after that candidate didn't join my previous organization. He used that offer probably as a batna to get a better offer someplace else. You might call him greedy, but that's how he negotiated, and that's how the policies were bent over for a real super good candidate. So that's one very personal example. I got this as a primary source of information from the HR of my previous org. The process of negotiation for a job offer: prepare, negotiate, and close. So that's what you have to do for negotiation. So preparation again, determine your partner. As I said, partner is the greatest source of power. Develop your partner, like the question Jigyasu had. Develop your partner. Try and get more job offers so that you have better alternatives keep coming. Revealing your partner. Do not reveal if your alternative is too poor. For example, in the previous question, if you don't have a job offer and if the current alternative is really not the best alternative which you have it, don't reveal it in a job offer negotiation. Don't reveal it. Just keep it with you, and probably, because if you reveal it, that's not going to help in any case. Do not lie and do not sound desperate. That means don't overplay your hands. Do not sound desperate, because desperation again lobs the ball in somebody else's court. And do not sound it like really a threat. And if you don't give me this, you're doing this with your current org or doing this with your new org. Don't sound it like a threat, because it's a small world, it's a small tech world, and it's a small business world. You might have to go back to some people again. So do not really make it sound like a threat. The approach is to, I really want to work for this, rather than if you don't raise, I will do this. So the perspective of communication is important. The way you communicate is important. I really want to work for this, but if you give me this, it will make it easier for me to make a decision, rather than speaking, if you don't raise, I will not take this. So those are two different approaches altogether. And try and determine other people's partner, as I said. So if you are negotiating for a job offer, which is a very domain specific, very niche job, there might be not too many candidates applying for it, then you know that the other side does not have too many alternatives. If you're going through a referral process, your friends are working there already, you might try and trigger some information that how many people are being interviewed, and at what stage I am, or what is my feedback around this. So try and ask in a more keeping your ethics in place, but try and find other people's alternative as well. What are you worth about? There are sources available. The salary benchmarking websites are there. You have a great network. I keep seeing questions on the remote Indian community where people ask at what's the best salary they should expect for this kind of a profile. So communities like Remote Indian or LinkedIn or platforms like, for that matter, are a great source of determining what you're worth. And know what you want. That's the most important for your negotiation to happen. There are multiple things which can be negotiated apart from money. So I work with reference.com, and I work as a product manager taking care of their marketing initiatives. I took you might call me foolish, or you might call me stupid. I took a 50% pay cut because after 12 years of experience, I wanted to move from technology towards marketing. So my clear goal was to move from technology towards marketing, and I was trying for 2 years. And somehow at every point of time, money would become a matter for me, that everybody will say that we can match this salary of marketing because you don't have legitimate experience in marketing. So my main ask was to change my career domain from career function from technology to marketing. And if I placed everything in a framework and I managed my finances for 2 years, and then I could take a 50% pay cut. And because my end goal was to move towards marketing largely. And third, work on your numbers. Because if you go for a job offer negotiation, or you go for any negotiation without doing your maths, then you might just float a number without even thinking about it. Doing the negotiation. So the first part of negotiation is to let the log roll. Let the log roll. That do you want to create an impasse at the beginning itself, or do you want to let the log roll? So figure out what are your essentials, what are your giveaways, and what are your distributive goals. That means, what are some things which you really want, what are some things which you can give away without being sad about them, and what are those things which you can distribute equally or in some proportion with the other side. For example, location might not be a constraint for you, or let's say designation might not be constraint for you, but money might be a constraint. So what you have as giveaways, try your negotiation with that first, because if you create an impasse at the beginning itself, then you're not letting the log roll. So start with what you can give away. The other side will also start with what they can give away, and the negotiation will initially start, and then you can work on your essentials and distributive goals. Look at the next point is first offer. Who should make the first offer? You or the company? So sometimes the company will ask you, what is your expectation? So in that case, it's a fairly reasonable question to ask. Are you giving me an offer, or are you giving me collecting, or are you just collecting information for the time being? Because this question will also tell the how at how much level is the other side considering you for this job offer. So if they are giving you collecting, if they are asking you just for collecting information, give an industry average. That's a fairly reasonable answer to give, because you don't want to disclose a number just for the sake of them asking, for the sake of collecting information. And if they are asking for an offer, give them a range. Don't give a spot on figure which you're actually looking for. Give them a range so that you leave a room for your own negotiation also at the at a later end. And that's primarily because the first offer generally serves as an anchor, because the first figure which you drop or the other party drops becomes the anchor figure, and every other figure will be mapped to what the initial offer was. Try and think about what's the first offer you're trying to give, because that's going to drive the negotiation further. Doing the negotiation in doing the negotiation process, making a counter offer. So once you get an offer, or once you get an offer from the company, making counter offer ideally should be made after a couple of days through research. Through research in terms of, is this the worth? Is it worth the current value? Is it worth vis-a-vis the other benefits you are being offered? Is it worth vis-a-vis what current employment situation do you actually have? So think through it and make it after a couple of days. Professor Himanshu suggests around 48 hours to make the counter offer, because you make it quickly, then you might end up losing something which you could have actually gained. Express your concerns as problems to be solved with solutions and not complaints. Again, that's a more collaborative approach for doing it. Look out for non-verbal clues. Non-verbal clues are something which are not said. The tonality of how the recruiter is saying to you, the poise which the recruiter is saying to you. Look out for non-verbal clues while you're making the counter offer. And this whole cycle continues. Remember your negotiation strategy. That's the cornerstone. Avoid changing it midway. If you want to have a collaborative, keep it collaborative. If you want to have it competitive, keep it competitive. But don't change it midway, because that's detrimental, again, detriment to your whole goal which you're seeking out of that negotiation. And remember, again, these are again most important things which should stay at the back of your minds. What do you really want out of this job offer, and what you can give away easily without feeling sad or nervous about them. Any questions? Or
I think there are a bunch of questions. So maybe we'll just open up, like we'll allow anyone to unmute themselves and ask their question. I think let's just finish going through this deck.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'll skip the case studies and we'll discuss questions. I think that would be better.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's some really good questions coming up. So
yeah. So what issues can you negotiate on? In my personal experience, and in my discussion, people have negotiated on these many parameters: on salary, on joining bonus, on joining date, on compensation structure, on designation, on nature of job, on who will somebody report to, on profit sharing, on reviews. So for example, for the current job offer which I took after 50% pay cut, I negotiate on the compensation structure so that I can take as much home salary home as possible, and the taxation reduces. The designation again, at times it becomes important for us to keep focus on designation considering the longish career which we want to have it. So again, Professor Himanshu's deck had around 50 points where you can negotiate on, but those are very minor points. Those are points which are not related to every audience. So I skipped on some and kept a very few, which I again verified with a lot of people through primary research. Other important things, negotiating with whom? Whom are you negotiating with? That's more important. Sometimes we negotiate with recruiter, but the hiring manager is the person who's taking the decision in the end. Thank and bank. If you get a job offer which is way above your expectation, thank it and bank it and return the favor someday if you want to. And don't burn the bridges. This is a small world. If the negotiation goes ugly, that's particularly fine. And don't burn the bridges, because you might end up having a similar opening or a different opening in the same organization. So don't burn the bridges at any point of time. Just end the negotiation on a very cordial note. So I'll skip this, and I recommend these two books to read. Both of them are on a very different approach. So this book is called the Bible of Negotiation Getting to Yes. In every literature, you will have a reference to this. So this talks about more collaborative negotiation. And this is a book called Never Split the Difference. This is written by Chris Voss. Chris Voss was a former FBI hostage negotiator. Though the title suggests that it talks about a competitive negotiation, but this again is in the book, he talks about how you can be collaborative with a lot of people while you negotiate. So I genuinely recommend these two books to be read, and that's a wrap. Yeah, we'll take on questions now. Abhishek?
Sure. So, guys, I think first of all, I think Ashutosh, this was a great insight into. I think like a few of the things, maybe as you rightly said, we might be doing it, but we are not doing it consciously. So, just having these terms, I think, helps us to be a little bit more prepared. So thanks for sharing all of these. I think everyone, if you have questions, I'll just allow anyone to unmute yourself. Just ask any questions. I think there were some really good questions in the chat itself. So, but I would prefer if the folks can just ask the questions themselves. Yeah.
And sorry for speaking in Hindi in between. I see a lot of comments now that can we keep it in English? I'm really sorry for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Which question?
So I maybe want to maybe kick off things maybe from the question side of things. So how do we practice some of our negotiation skills without actually being in that scenario itself? Like, is there something like a role play, or can we do mock calls? Or I'm not sure whether that's a thing. Is that something which people do? Doing calls with their friends? I'm not sure. What are some practical things we can start doing, as in rather than waiting for the next job opportunity, let's say?
No, but Abhishek, my personal take on it is that you not overdoing this, but slightly understanding that every possible transaction which we do with somebody is a possible floor for negotiation. So after doing this course, I gave about a lot of interviews, but I really practiced it day-to-day basis with my team. So for example, I had a team, I had 8 people reporting to me, and they would come up with their own concerns, their own expectations. And I would actually use this framework to negotiate with them for their own expectations. So it's not the case that you need to have a very business deal kind of a platform to actually practice this. But if you change your mindset that every transaction which we do can be negotiated with, then probably you can put a lot of this into practice on a day-to-day basis also. That's my honest take on this.
I get that. Thanks for clarifying that. I think I'm just looking at the questions, and one question which stood out was from Muhammad Gadi. As in, I think I'll just rephrase that question. What would be a good time to talk about your salary expectations? There's one extreme where I know that you shouldn't be talking about expectations in the first call, but then you also shouldn't be knowing their budget after 5 interviews. So how do we go about doing that? And maybe we can also do some research on Glassdoor and all of those things, but I wanted to know your things, your suggestions.
So my personal input on that, is that it will depend from company to company, because in certain companies it would become a situation that you're giving 5 tech interviews or itself, and HR will not talk to you about the offer negotiation. But if at any point of time, like you have mentioned in this chat also, if at any point of time you feel that you are about to invest a time which you cannot take it back further, that if the deal does not happen by now, you will feel invested in this and you will take up whatever comes to you. I think that's the right time to ask the question. But at the same time, I would put this on a perspective that in power of investment is both sides. For example, if you invest time with the companies also invested a lot of time with you, and if you are sailing through it, the probability that you will land a job is higher as compared to getting at an early stage. So my straightforward answer to this is, when you feel that if you invest further, you will actually take up whatever it is coming to you, then ask that question. What's the salary expectation which you have?
I think this reminds me of a term called affordable loss. I think like just being aware of what is affordable loss for you, I think that gives you a lot of clarity when you are.
Yeah. So you know that after 2 interviews, I will walk away. I will not take this further.
Exactly. And for people who are just starting off their career, I think they have a lot of leeway in this regard. Like they can even take up an internship where they are not paid well, but they get to learn a lot. So I think it's not just monetary, and I think I really appreciate the decision that you took, man. I think that's really, a lot of people generally feel a little iffy about changing their track, let's say. I think especially when
Ashutosh, a question for you. So you said that you practice.
In a moment. I'll excuse for a moment. My son is a bit crying. Just a minute.
So I think we can just ask that question. Who was that? Shardul?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
Ashutosh, you said that you are using this framework on a day-to-day basis with your team. Would you mind giving an example of what are the kind of situations that you use it? It is clear as to how to use this for a salary negotiation kind of a framework, but how do you use it in day-to-day situations?
Yeah, let me figure out an example. I just can come with an example which for a very real case. Okay. I'll take up the next question and I'll answer this for sure. Just let me think over a real situation which
Sure.
Yeah. I'll take this up for sure. What's the right time to ask for a raise, Ashutosh? Jigyasu, I am no pro. I have given only a few interviews till now in my career of 12 years. But if you feel, I don't know how to answer this question, because if I tell this, probably I'll not be able to make justice to this answer. I'm thinking of this answer for the previous question asked. Okay. I'll tell you this. Okay. I'm missing on the name of the person who asked the question.
This was Shardul.
Shardul. Hi, Shardul. You have some interesting questions already. Yeah. So we have a policy in my previous organizations. We had a policy that if two people of a team get married, of course, a boy and a girl, the one of them will have to change his team to some other team. That's the policy which our organization had. And in my team, a girl and boy were about to get married to each other. So one of them had to change their teams. So I was asked that who should change their team, and it will go to my peer team itself. The larger team would still remain the same, a little bit two different departments. That's it. So I chose the boy will change his team, and it was flowing through. And that boy, he wanted to work with me, or he wanted to work in the same project which I was working with. And it came up till an extent that मेरे को अपना टीम नहीं चेंज करना है, आप उसका टीम चेंज कर दो, या मेरे को टीम चेंज करना ही क्यों है, या why should I get this team change? This is a policy, but this policy can be changed since both of us are doing well, and this is not a global policy, it's a local policy, and we can change it. So he was very adamant. He was on understanding that it's a policy. I could have told him that it's a policy and you have to follow this, and he would have taken a heavy heart probably, and he would have not have his trust on me would have reduced. So what internal arrangement which we made was that he would report to the other team's manager, but I will remain his mentor till the time he stays in the other team, till the time he reports to the other team manager. So basically his interest was to work on the same project as which this team was working on, and with the same team. So his interest was this, and he was taking a position that he doesn't want to report it there. So we solved his interest by making him work on the same project with the same team, with the same mentor, and we could sail it through.
Nice. So, sure, if you don't mind, a follow-up question.
Yeah, sure.
So which concepts of the ones which you presented, BATNA, ZOPA, etc., did you use in this negotiation?
So interest. So for me, I genuinely work on the most important concept is interests. So if you have your interests sorted in your head, and if you are able to trigger out the other party's interests in your head, then you will be able to then you will be able to close it for sure. My interest was to change a job into a different business function. Money was, yes, money, everybody needs money, but I could figure out the money for 2 years, and I could save a bit of a corpus with me, and then took that decision. I think because I was clear on my interest as to what I actually want. Sometimes our bosses don't want us to work extra hours. We think that's a psychological barrier which we have. It's just that they want us to finish it on time or with a desired output quality, which we in the face of stubbornness take it otherwise. So that's the answer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Then I think we are finishing up on our promised time. I think this has been a great session. I feel we can always continue the conversation back on Slack.